the incredible, the fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, come one and come all to a film you've never seen before. But remember, folks, no refunds.
Hello and welcome to No Refunds, the podcast where we watch bad movies so you don't have to. A Cold North joint. I'm your host, Ben Reynolds, and this week we watched Steven Spielberg's 2008 film, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Joining me for this discussion, we have the always effervescent Andrew Etchin.
Ooh, hello.
Dapper Tim Miller.
Why, hello there.
And Patrick the Law Morris.
How many cock pictures do you think you could fit on a 256 gig phone?
I don't care.
All right.
I mean, figuring each cock might be like, I don't know, not even a meg.
Yeah. All right.
Check out everything we have going on over at coldnorthpro.com. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review wherever you found our podcast. And now, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Legend says that a crystal skull was stolen from a mythical lost city in the Amazon. Supposedly built out of solid gold, guarded by the living dead. Whoever returns the skull to the city temple will be given control over its power.
You will help us find it. A simple yes will do. Well, we will do this old-fashioned way.
Put your hands down, will you? You're embarrassing us. Don't touch anything.
All right. So here we start out with the plot each week. And to get this plot, we go to Google and we search for the movie. And we read the synopsis that Google spits out when you Google the movie. So here's what we've got. It's the height of the Cold War, and famous archaeologist Indiana Jones, returning from his latest adventure, finds out his job at Marshall College is in jeopardy. He meets Mutt, a young man who wants Indy to help him find the legendary crystal skull of Akator, and the pair set out for Peru. However, deadly agent Irina Spalko is searching for the powerful artifact, too, because the Soviets believe it can help them conquer the world.
Soviets.
That's
it even ties into modern day.
That's literally where the plot ends. The Google plot synopsis ends, though. So,
I mean, let's be honest. That's all you really need.
Thanks, Google.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that nothing in there is inaccurate, but
they're like they can't tell you everything about it.
Sorry, go ahead.
You can't give away too much about who Mutt is, I guess, because you can't. That's a big reveal in the movie, so they can't tell you that Mutt is Indy's son.
Whoa, spoilers.
Well, I think if you're listening to a podcast
Mutt,
about the,
so that's a first start.
Oh yeah,
well,
I didn't catch that.
And if you're listening to a podcast about the movie, I would hope that you're expecting spoilers, I would guess. But it's like
there are also movies that they've been out for a while, so come on.
It just feels like such a brief synopsis for as much happens in the movie. I don't know. I guess that's why I'm unsatisfied by it.
It reminds me a lot of the back of a VHS cover.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's like a quick little synopsis just to get you get your taste buds going, because they even have all these Indiana Jones movies popping up on Netflix now, and their synopses are not much better, and they're even shorter, and it's just like Indiana Jones goes to some place, there's some sort of thing that he'll use to do something else with.
But in a movie like The Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know that they're looking for the Ark of the Covenant because that's something that's actually famous.
That's true.
Had you ever heard of the Crystal Skull before this film?
Actually, yes.
No, because the Crystal Skull it's like the head that they keep talking about, how it's similar to the shape of that head. That's the only thing that's really that you might have heard about before this.
I
the
feel
Mitchell
like
Hedges skull, right?
Yes, correct, Tim. Would you repeat that one more time?
The Mitchell Hedges skull.
Yes, that is correct.
Tim, you should pump. Yeah, so I feel like I watched a lot of History Channel with certain Andrew Ryan Schroeder, friend of the show, as this movie was coming out, and I feel like I had seen something about crystal skulls on that channel.
But they also have entire shows called Ancient Aliens and things like that.
Okay, fair point. Pawn Stars.
Yeah, like I don't know that you can really say, oh yeah, History Channel, but like that's so like I think that like when you're like, oh yeah, they're going after the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and like then in the second and the third movie, you kind of already know Indiana Jones, and I guess that the Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and he doesn't really search for anything specific.
No, you're right. Indiana Jones is supposed to sell this movie. I just feel like that they maybe could have used a little bit more explanation about the skull of Akator. Maybe.
I think that this movie could have used a lot more explanation of everything. I feel like they were so concerned with selling an Indiana Jones movie that they just were like, all right, guess what? It's Indiana Jones. He's back. And now an adventure. And they just ran with it. And they never stopped to explain anything. They never stopped to do any storytelling. It was just constantly a chase.
Yeah, it was just like a big action. Well, but at the same time, when was the last time you guys watched the old Indiana Jones movies? Because I actually watched a couple of them on Netflix not too recent, like pretty recently, I mean, and they're kind of the same. Like the whole movie is just this like crazy, constant, like going from like being chased to doing some sort of like puzzle to usually being in danger somehow and then being somehow safe again, but then immediately back in the clutches of the bad guys. And the Crystal Skull, they actually like, it's just as like pretty cheesy and silly as the old movies. And so where I used to hate it, I thought it fit right into the to the group now. I'm like, you know what? It's a great movie.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I do agree that the old movies do have the same feel. Like there's really like not that much, because like as soon as you get in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first scene is when he does the classic sandbag thing to get the whatever he's grabbing.
To get the little golden idol.
Yeah, and then after that you get the Mr. Jones scene. Like that's
short
an
round
action-packed scene.
The little kid in that, his voice is so intensely.
Or no, he says Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones.
But yeah, like that, they're action-packed. They are very action-packed.
Why couldn't Short Round have made a cameo in this movie?
That would have been cool.
Died.
He's not dead. What?
I like how Tim that's like the first thing Tim said in like a while. It's just
He's dead.
But wait, is the like actor who plays Short Round?
Oh God, that would be
I honestly have no idea.
Oh,
I'm gonna look that up. Rest in
Quick
peace.
Google.
I'm not going to feel bad.
So Tim, what do you think about the plot? This plot summary.
Honestly, I thought it was all right. It did leave a little bit to be desired. Like, I wouldn't exactly say his most recent adventure. I wouldn't exactly classify climbing inside of a lead-lined fridge an adventure.
Oh yeah, that is probably the most preposterous thing ever. And he comes out of the fridge.
Hold on. We're not there yet, Andrew. We don't need to just because we talked about the
So
fridge
crazy.
doesn't mean we have to talk about it now.
So bonkers.
Yeah. So I agree with that, Tim. Their definition of an adventure is a little.
Yeah.
Google needs a new definition of adventure.
They definitely do. But I mean, overall, without giving too much of the plot away, I think they did a pretty decent job this time.
Yeah. All right.
Quick
Well,
update. He's alive.
nice.
All right.
Well, so Short Round should have made a cameo.
Totally.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, so for each film we go through, we'll revisit these 6 questions to lead our discussion. And the first question is, how bad was it?
Yeah.
I personally did not think it was nearly as... So, all right, let me give you a little bit of history. So I saw this movie the night it opened at midnight, and I passed out in the movie theater and never saw it again until we watched it for the show, which is 10 years later. Or more than 10 years later.
Yeah, I
So-
think literally same here. Like saw it in theaters.
Yeah, and so I had fallen asleep, and I just remembered being like, yeah, whatever. The parts of it that I saw didn't make very much sense at all, and that was stupid. Like I didn't like that movie. But now, having actually watched the entire thing, I didn't feel like it was that bad. Like I was kind of like, oh, this is actually pretty fun. Like,
Yeah, right. That's how I felt.
It gets a lot of hate, and I think that part of the reason it gets so much hate is because that was the narrative when it first came out. And I'm kind of in agreement with you guys that I watched this and I was like, I mean, it's obviously the worst Indiana Jones movie.
agreed.
But that doesn't mean that it's just a straight up bad movie.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is that when the movie came out, it had been so many years since the originals that people just
19,
expected.
in fact.
Yeah, like people expected like a really different, like amazing movie. And that's, I think, why initially everyone was like, what the fuck was that? That was a bunch of garbage. But then when you watch the old Indiana Jones movies, Spielberg made Crystal Skull in the same style. Like even the light, they're like using crazy digital cameras and they still are like purposefully making all the lighting really ridiculous and old
Actually, I don't think they were using digital cameras because I read that this was one of the first
Were they
like,
not?
when it released. Spielberg wanted it tried to insist that they only show it on actual like
film.
And but then I guess
Well, either way,
Columbia
that just lends even more to the fact that he just tried to make the movie at like the exact same way as the old movies with like the same old cheesy nostalgia, and it like it fits right in there. And I'm like right on board with you. I was just like, I actually really enjoyed that this time.
yeah, totally.
Except for the spaceship scene. Spaceship scene's a little much.
It was very obviously an attempt at recreating the same style and visuals, but I feel like it did fall victim to the same things the same mistakes that were made by George Lucas in the Star Wars special editions and the prequel trilogy. And don't get me wrong, I love the prequel movies, but he was trying to capture that same aesthetic while at the same time trying to make it very family friendly, and it came off feeling very plastic.
Totally. I would agree with that.
And I think that was a lot of the lighting. Like, my God, everything was just so bright all the time.
Tim, how bad did you think it was?
See, I really enjoyed this movie this time around. When it first came out, I was one of those people that was like, okay, this isn't like a great Indiana Jones movie, so I'm probably not going to watch it a whole lot. But after watching it this time, I'm probably going to go back and rewatch it plenty more times. That being said, one thing I did not like about this movie was that the suspension of disbelief, I had to like, there were a lot of things in this movie that was just like, okay, I can't believe that this is actually happening. Where in most of the other previous ones, it was like, okay, I could actually see that somewhat being possible.
Yeah.
But like with
like
this,
they got real science fiction-y with this one.
yeah. Well, the thing that comes to mind, I think, is the scene where the saw blade comes careening through and like cutting through half of the vehicles, and they still keep driving after them.
And,
It's like,
and
no,
none of them are hurt whatsoever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it,
exactly.
like, cuts the fucking car in half.
Tim, I actually totally agree with you. I think I even made a note maybe about like the saw blade goes through, and it's like the wheel, like the spare wheel on top of the hood, completely cut in half. But that's where it stopped. Like it did not go any lower than that because the motor, the engine of the car, totally fine.
Well, to go off that too, though, I think that whole scene, because they're like shooting at them and people are fighting with swords. It's like this preposterous scene. I think it plays up how lucky Indiana Jones is supposed to be, that he just like gets in these situations and he's just like outstandingly lucky. And there's like even a scene where, you know, right before all of that happens, where they're in the car and, you know, his like ex gets in the front and she's like, and all of a sudden Shia LaBeouf's like, what the hell's he doing? And she's like, I don't know, he never thinks that far ahead. And he just like pulls out a fucking rocket launcher. Like, I think it's basically just to be like, Indiana Jones just constantly gets what he needs. And like, he's just like outrageously lucky.
True.
Shouldn't we all be?
So
I wish.
Ben,
so I guess we can go back to our questions and we can say, what made it bad? Tim, what do you think made it bad?
Like I just said, I had to suspend so much disbelief. Like, aside from the saw blade, I'm going to mention it again. The refrigerator. I don't think he would have survived that. That's just...
you absolutely would not have.
That's just ridiculous.
You also would have gone another like 75 miles. Like if you were in the middle of a fucking nuclear explosion, do you really think that fucking fridge is gonna land anywhere near that cloud? Like, I feel like that thing's gonna just fucking fly like dozens of miles.
So, Tim, you've mentioned suspension of disbelief. I do want to kind of get your take on the ants. Like,
oh, that's my favorite part.
Okay, so yeah, that was a little bit ridiculous, but I'm like, okay, giant killer ants, they're gonna swarm. I can somewhat understand if this actually existed, this would kind of work like this.
Yeah.
So that one I didn't mind so much, but like when it comes to like mechanical failures, like that saw blade is just like no, I can't believe that one.
Ben, what do you think made it bad?
I don't know.
A bunch of people.
I feel like bringing Marion back was a weird choice. And I feel like it could have been, I don't know. I think if I had to really nail down one thing that made it bad to me was the Marion Indy relationship, because they were just like, God, they were just very, like, they meet back up and she tells him, oh, by the way, he's your son. And then he's like, then suddenly they're making a bunch of quips about like daddy-o and all this stuff. And then they're just back together after literally years of not seeing each other.
Yeah. But that's also, again, just keeps going back to the old movies. Like that movie, the one with with the little Asian kid, and and like Kalima, like the woman in that movie just all of a sudden is like, just goes like one scene from being like really pissed off at him to just being like swoon. And that's kind of just how it goes for Indiana Jones. You just got to roll with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were a lot of characters in the movie for sure.
I felt like the fact that it was just the things that made it the worst were the fact that it was a rehash of the first three movies' plots, just with different characters and artifacts.
And less likable characters.
Yeah. I also thought that the interdimensional beings were a terrible MacGuffin. That's a fucking horrible MacGuffin.
I mean, they are like textbook MacGuffin.
Yeah, it's just like, so you're just gonna explain this all away with interdimensional beings? Like what?
It's like aliens.
It's plot convenience.
Well, they weren't aliens. They were interdimensional beings.
You see, it's different because
they go outside the dimension. All right. Well, I hear you. I hear it.
So the next question is, which character was the worst? For this, I had Irina, because why did she want to learn about... They didn't give her any reason why she wanted to learn about psychic stuff so much. I mean, she loosely kept saying, like, so for Soviet world dominance and stuff like that, but I don't know. It didn't seem like she had her motivation seemed lacking. And then I said that, yeah, they should have had a scene that actually, like, with like her Stalin telling her to do something. I know they never had Hitler in any of the old movies or anything like that, but it just, I don't know.
Nazis.
She just did not seem very. I just couldn't find any motivation for her to really like be going as hard for it as she was.
And something I actually had a problem with her as a character was she was just so obviously an attempt at recreating the iconic moments of like the face melting in Raiders and the guy who was so desperate for the for the goblet at the end of Last Crusade.
Holy Grail.
Yeah, the Holy Grail at the end of Last Crusade. And she was just so obviously like them trying to create another iconic moment. And it's like, I do understand that. I guess it's kind of like trying to make a viral video. It's like, you can't just say, I'm going to make a viral video and just will it into existence. It has to start as something like that. It
has
really
to come
like.
From nowhere.
Yeah.
And be everywhere.
And then it's just, like out there, except now I guess you can create a viral video because of YouTube's algorithm, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I think that was a pretty weak character too, Ben. I think that she had no motivation and she was the main villain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tim, what about you?
No, I'm in complete agreement with her. She was terrible. I mean, you see her in maybe 10 scenes total throughout the entirety of the movie.
Yeah.
And she's always scowling in her Russian scowl.
Andrew, did you have a different opinion, or
the only other character I would maybe throw in there would be, for the same reasons. I don't remember her name, but basically like the woman who is the mother of Indiana Jones's kid. Marion. Her being Marion. Sorry, yeah, her being thrown in there is just sort of a classic trope to the whole thing. Like they just kept like the same formula of everything else. But I don't know. I also am weirded out by the fact that she named her child Mutt, like he was dog.
No, she named him Henry. He's Henry Jones the third.
I'm gonna believe what I'm gonna believe.
Well, they say several times that his name is Henry.
They do.
And then her motivation is the fact that Ox was who's John Hurt's character, Harold Oxley, was basically had acted as a father for her son, and so she was good friends with him, and then she got kidnapped.
Yeah, and okay, so Ben, you mentioned Oxley, and I do want to, as long as we're discussing the worst character, I don't think Oxley himself was really bad. I just think he was completely unnecessary because there was a character in the series already that already had ties to Marion that would have been much better to fit the role. Why did they not just bring Salah back? Like, he's the John Rhys Davies character.
Yeah, I know. I remember Salah, but I don't know. I think partially because, like, well, without stepping on, somebody had suggested that they use Hurt, and they had created a new character in the screenplay, and they really liked John Hurt, which I really like John Hurt too.
I do
and
too.
Apparently the character was inspired by Ben Gunn from Treasure Island, so he's supposed to be just like a crazy person. And I don't know. It would have been like, yeah, Sallah could have been more effective, but I don't know if Sallah could have played crazy as well.
I guess that's right.
I also don't think you would have had enough money to get out of Egypt. Just saying.
Tim's thinking economically here.
All right. Well, so that brings us to our next question, which is, which character was the best?
Indy.
So I think
Obviously,
I was
Indy.
guessing that we're all probably going to have Indiana Jones. So I said Indiana Jones. I said, yes, it's shitty that he left Marion with child, but it's equally messed up that she didn't tell him that she was pregnant.
Truth.
And he was able to overcome his friend Mac's betrayal and help Mac in the end.
That's true.
He's pretty nice dude, and like ended up saving the world the third time, you know. So it's makes him a pretty good character. I do want to say that I had an honorable mention for Dovchenko. Dovchenko, he just wanted everybody to shut up, and he was just listening to orders, and then he ended up getting eaten by ants.
Ben, you know who else was just listening to orders? The Nazis.
Yeah, but he just wanted everybody to shut up.
You can't just do what the man tells you.
He just wanted everyone to shut up.
Exactly.
But
yeah, all right, sorry, Pat.
no, I just gotta throw this out there for the best character. Thinking outside the box. Was it Janitor?
Who?
The FBI agent?
Yeah, at the very beginning of the movie, Dr. Jan Itor.
FBI agents Taylor and Smith. I'm not sure if he was Taylor or Smith. But
They're
I would say
G-men.
no, not them, because they made the FBI look dumb.
Yeah, but it was
They're
nice
just supposed
seeing
to be there to
Janitor.
make the FBI look stereotypical in that era.
Okay, so okay, that's
They're
right.
like, we're spooky G-men. Like that's that's who they are.
But I do have to. This question did come to me in this scene when Janitor is interrogating Indy, and then Alan Dale comes in. Which, by the way, I love Alan Dale. And he comes in and he's like, "Do you know how many medals he's won?" And it's like, was Indy ever in the the military?
Yes, he was he was like special forces, and that's what he keeps talking about, how that's why he and Mac have like the whole remember Berlin.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because they said that too, and I just
He basically was like a secret agent during World War II.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't remember them ever establishing that, but that's pretty cool.
I think that actually that may be established in some of the like young indie stuff.
Young Indiana Jones. What a terrible show.
Actually, I've been told that it's not that bad because like Frank Darabont actually wrote some of the episodes.
Really?
I can't remember which one it is. It was either 17 or 18. It had something to do with like Peacock Gem. I don't remember the name of it, but that one was actually really good. I do remember watching that one.
Tim's actually watched Young Indiana Jones. I've never watched it.
I didn't even know there was a young Indiana Jones.
It was
that's where the idea for him to have a kid that he didn't know about came from too.
Oh, really?
But it was a daughter in Young Indiana Jones.
Props to Shia LaBeouf Like, I mean, he took a pretty bad character and he did what he could with it. And granted, yes, he swung through the trees with the monkeys. That
Oh
happened.
yeah, I
can't-
forgot about that. Oh god,
Yeah, that was weird.
He
that was
definitely
very weird. That was,
did a good job.
super weird.
But yes, I gotta agree with you, Ben. Indiana Jones.
Yeah, he was a great character. Tim or Andrew, do you guys have anyone else to introduce as the best character?
No, I was gonna go with Indy, but I do want to say something about the Mutt thing. When he tries to pick up the hat at the end, and Indy just takes it from him, I just laughed. I was like, "Yep,
Yeah.
that's what you deserve."
That was nice
Indy
because
takes the hat.
it was so typical of like,
That was
oh,
kinda
of course
their
they're
way.
gonna do this.
I feel like it was also their way of just being like, there will not be a fourth Indiana Jones.
Fifth, and there actually is going to be a fifth.
Oh god, really?
Yeah.
I don't want to step on
Well,
any
don't-
half-assed
don't-
research.
Let's just leave it. Let's just leave that there. But so let's now before we get to our last two questions, Patrick, do you have any notes you want to share?
Oh God, the CGI prairie dog looked bad. Like,
Yeah,
is that what CGI in the late 2000s looked like? Because I remember thinking it looked pretty
I don't-
good.
think so. I have a pretty funny one though. Is Mac a triple agent? And like or question mark exclamation point question mark, and then under that, what a cock.
God. I actually notated about the triple agent too, and I was like, that's just disappointing because that's just such lazy writing. Like, no, he's a bad guy. No, he's a good guy. No, he is what's convenient to the writers in that moment.
Yeah. And then I also thought it was funny that ultimately losing ended up winning for them. Like they like technically they thought they lost, but really they ended up winning because things didn't work the way that Irina thought that they would.
Yeah,
Which is kind of funny.
I felt like the movie was just really exhausting.
Yeah. I have a note that says Shia is part monkey. Death by ants is particularly terrible. Are they in a car boat? Yup.
Well,
Car boat. Yeah, where she just drives off and conveniently lands in the tree and it just like dips them into the water and she's like, see, you're like classic Indiana Jones.
and as she's doing that, Andrew, she's like, trust me. And I'm like, bitch, are you fucking kidding me?
You're like, you're fucking crazy.
Exactly.
Like, we're all gonna die.
Exactly.
This is
And then
actually-
she gets
this-
all smug about it.
I've got a probably unanswerable question. Why did the vine lift Shia higher when it just caught him and pulled him out of the car? Why did it keep lifting him up?
Because it was obviously a haunted forest.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
You're welcome. Less likely than being a haunted jungle, though. Falling off 4 or 5 people, falling off 3 waterfalls in a car boat, and all being in the car.
I don't know, man.
Well, if you actually go back and look at the scene, you will notice, at least after the second one of them is like partly climbing back in, on the far side.
Oh,
So
you got me, Tim. It's
Yep.
totally believable now.
So I do think that it is. We brought up the fridge a little bit earlier, and I do think it's worthwhile to bring up the fact that the term "nuking the fridge" became like Indiana Jones's own version of jumping the shark.
Yeah.
Because it was time. It literally was chosen as number 5 on Time Magazine's list of top 10 buzzwords of 2008. Nuking the fridge was.
Really?
Nuking the fridge?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, and
We have
apparently
to bring it back.
Spielberg said, "Blame me, don't blame George." That was my silly idea. I'm proud of that. I'm glad I was able to bring that into pop culture. And then,
Spielberg's got no regrets.
Solidifying history.
but then George Lucas denied that, saying that Spielberg was protecting him. According to Lucas, he assembled a dossier of research that to convinced Spielberg. Basically, Lucas stated that his research claimed that the odds of surviving in a refrigerator are about 50-50.
So, okay.
I don't know about that. The amount of gravity you'd be facing, the second that thing hit the ground, you would be like,
Yeah,
and like
dead.
smashed into a corner. Like,
Well, the fact that it was just showing that like literally everything else was just being vaporized. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it's lead, but literally everything else is being vaporized.
Literally everything else.
Even the bad guys.
So I do want to say, if there is a positive takeaway to nuking the fridge, it's that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are both really good guys trying to take the bullet for each other.
Yeah, right.
Just
that's a good point.
Good, wholesome friends.
All right. Well, let's get on to our next question, which is, was it so bad it was good?
yes.
I mean, I don't
think it
guess-
was. I don't think it was even so bad it was bad.
That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm like, was it so bad? Was it bad even, or was it just good?
It's just a good movie.
Like,
I mean, it's not great, but it's definitely good.
It's not as bad as
It's entertaining.
like
It's super-
like I Know What You Did Last Summer was bad, but the badness did make it rewatchable. Whereas this is just like, it's kind of like, yeah, it's an adventure, like we were talking about. I don't think this was bad. Like, I think that this movie is another one, along with Starship Troopers, that may not belong on the
On the podcast.
on the podcast. Sorry, Patrick.
I do think that it wasn't great, but one thing that did strike me, and this is just, I don't know why this hit me while we were talking about is it so bad that it's good, but like, it's odd that it took this long for them to do an Indiana Jones story about El Dorado.
Yeah.
That's just something that I just found puzzling, because like Uncharted is the obvious contemporary comparison. And I know I bring Uncharted up on pretty much every show a lot. But it's because it's so good. But like Uncharted 1 was all about El Dorado. And it took 4 movies for Indiana Jones to get to El Dorado. Just seemed fishy.
Well, it almost took 4 Mummy movies to get to El Dorado too, but then they killed that.
Yeah. Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
Let's shame. We'll just shame the studio into reviving that series and signing Antonio Banderas.
I'll get my Coke.
All right. Well, so then
Big
let's get to
Sora.
our last question, which is, would it have been better as a Netflix/HBO series? I don't think this would have. Like, usually I think that the go-to is like, obviously, but this movie, I think because then it would have been longer, and I don't know that I needed more. I don't need, like, yes, I guess it could have been nice to get a little more background on Irina, but I don't need more background on any of the other characters, really.
I think that one of the biggest problems with the movie was the length, and making it longer would have made it even worse.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they have to make it like a fun little wrapped up movie, so by the end you're kind of just like, huh, that's satisfying, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I remember, so I've never watched Young Indiana Jones, but I remember, like, even as a kid when I heard about it, thinking like, I just don't like the concept of a like Indiana Jones TV series. It feels like a character that I want to like revisit every few years, but not every week.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that brings us to our favorite segment every week, which is borrowing from the rewatchables on the Ringer Podcast Network, half-assed internet research. So, apparently, and this is not in the order of which way these people worked on them. I'll fill you guys in on that. But so apparently, screenwriters Jeb Stewart, Jeffrey Boehm, Frank Darabont, and Jeff Nathanson all wrote drafts before David Koepp's script satisfied Lucas and Spielberg.
Spielbergo.
Yeah. So it sounds like, from what I was reading, it sounds like they were really like basically Darabont wrote a pretty good script, and so Frank Darabont, who wrote various Young Indiana Jones episodes, as I said earlier, was hired to write in May of 2002. His script, which was entitled Indiana Jones and the City of Gods, was set in the 1950s with ex-Nazis pursuing Jones. Spielberg conceived of the idea because of real-life figures such as Juan Perón in Argentina, who protected Nazi war criminals. Darabont claimed that Spielberg loved the script, but Lucas had issues with it and decided to take over writing himself. And by taking over writing himself, he meant bringing in 4 other screenwriters to mess with Frank Darabont.
Oh, man.
All right. Now, Ben, you're laughing about this, but let's be thankful, because when George Lucas actually takes over writing himself, we get dialogue like, I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. It's coarse and it gets everywhere.
I mean, he's not wrong, though.
It does. It really does.
Have you ever seen a child yell, yippee?
I was going to say, Ben, give us one more for good measure.
Yippee!
Now, everyone.
So, yippee!
Yippee.
Apparently, though, the filmmakers intended to pay tribute to the science fiction B movies of the 1950s era, which I guess that's partially why they why they went with the interdimensional aliens. But then, I also read a whole lot of stuff that was saying that Spielberg was like, yeah, I don't want to do aliens ever again in a movie. After I think, basically, they'd talked about it a little bit after the Close Encounters of the Third Kind had came out, and Harrison Ford was like, "Yeah, no, I don't want to do that. If that's the way they're gonna go with this, I'm out." And so then Spielberg was like, "Yeah, let's not do it." Spielberg basically said that he would not do anything after. Oh no! Independence Day was the thing that made him be like, "Yep, not doing anything with aliens." Lucas started working on the Star Wars prequels after that happened, and then apparently they rebooted it then around 2000, and that's when they got Darabont to write the screenplay, and then Lucas basically convinced Spielberg to use aliens in the plot by saying that they were not extraterrestrial but interdimensional.
I can just, the aliens guy meme, I can see George Lucas going to Spielberg and being like, interdimensional.
They're not aliens, they're interdimensional.
Exactly.
It explains it.
And apparently George Lucas was also the one who suggested using crystal skulls to ground the idea. He found those artifacts as fascinating as the Ark of the Covenant.
Seriously?
Okay.
Oh God, that's dumb.
Oh wow! Apparently they'd brought in I didn't read this before, but apparently they brought in M. Night. They hired M. Night Shyamalan briefly, but then he was too busy writing a sequel to a film that he loved.
He kept
he was too busy at the time.
Kept trying to recast Indiana Jones as Bruce Willis. No, guys, trust me, it'll be great. M. Night, your movies are weird.
Samuel L. Jackson. That was going to be the twist at the end, is that actually Indiana Jones had been Samuel L. Jackson the whole time.
They called him Mr. Glass.
Mr. Glass.
All right. So back to that. Spielberg actually cast Russian speaking actors for the Soviet soldiers so that their accents would be authentic. I thought that was a piece of interesting I guess just half-assed internet research. Then I also found out that to maintain aesthetic. So Andrew, this one actually specifically deals with a lot of the stuff you were talking about earlier. But to maintain aesthetic continuity with the previous films, the crew relied on traditional stunt work instead of computer-generated stunt doubles. And cinematographer Janusz Kaminski studied Douglas Slocum's style from the previous films. And Janusz Kaminski was the cinematographer that Spielberg's used for everything since, like, I want to say he was the Schindler's List, maybe. It might have even been before that. But so he obviously had never worked on any of the Indiana Jones ones or Indiana Jones films, and the cinematographer that Spielberg had used on the first 3 movies was Douglas Slocum. And so Janusz Kaminski studied his style and his lighting and all of that, and that's
made it like almost the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that if you were really talking to people about like serious cinematographers, I think a lot of people would say that Janusz Kaminski is maybe one of the best that there is.
Well, Ben, you mentioned he's the guy that shot Schindler's List, and holy shit. Yeah. Like that's all I got to say about that.
Exactly. I also read that Spielberg didn't want to satirize Nazis anymore after making Schindler's List, and so that's partially why they decided to switch them to Soviets.
I also think contextually that just made a lot more sense.
Well, and like in the time frame. Although I do think it could have been interesting to, like, because you don't really, there's not there is that movie that has Oscar Isaac in it that just came out last year, but there's not a lot of movies about like Nazis hiding in South America.
Yeah,
true.
And that, I feel like that could be
we've all but flushed them out.
More of those movies. I do want to see that one with Oscar Isaac from last year. I never did see that.
Ben, so in your half-assed internet research, did you read anything about the real Indiana Jones 4?
No.
Called Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb?
No.
Oh yeah,
Sounds familiar.
I know of that one.
It was on the Xbox, the original Xbox, and was it on the PS2, Tim?
I remember that
it was on
Indiana
PS2,
Jones
it was on
Nintendo.
Xbox. I don't know if it was on GameCube. That's the one I'm not sure if it was on.
It was great. Like it's legitimately a really good game.
I'm pretty sure it's actually called Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
No, you're thinking of I think that's like the Sega game.
Well, this says, for the video game which is labeled as Indy 4, see Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
What?
I'm checking. I have the game on my shelf. Hold on.
I mean, there's also Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine.
Oh, yeah,
This game came out in 92, and it's point and click, so I would guess that this would really be Indiana Jones 4.
But where do they place it in the timeline? Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Wherever they want. It's Indiana
It looks like fucking like
yeah, it's probably an old
Oregon
DOS
Trail.
game.
It looks like Oregon Trail, but Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I'd play it.
Indiana
Got 5
Jones.
stars from Dragon. The one gave it an 88%. Amiga Computing gave it 88%. Amiga Format, I don't know why they have two different things giving ratings, but Amiga Format gave it a 92%. Commodore user gave it 90%, and PC Review gave it a 9 out of 10.
All right.
Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb was a LucasArts game, and it was awesome.
I think this actually may have been the first LucasArts game.
No, they weren't doing.
It was definitely developed by LucasArts, so I do think this was the first LucasArts game.
Damn. Well, going off what I was saying, the Emperor's Tomb game, great. Check it out. It can be had for cheap. I have my receipt for my copy in the box. I bought this on August 5th of 2017, and I paid, holy shit, I paid $14. I might have overpaid for this game.
You definitely overpaid for that game, especially considering how clunky the controls are nowadays. It's virtually unplayable.
Nah, it's great.
All right, well, back to the film.
Sorry.
So the film did 101 million in its opening weekend, which is that's pretty close to the best of anything we've done so far. It grossed 317 million domestically and a total of 786 million worldwide against a budget of 185 million. So this is technically the most successful film in the box office that we've done. Spider-Man 3 grossed more, but the budget was almost twice as big.
So, question for you. Did it gross more than Gotti?
Like,
Duh.
Like 786 million times more?
Oh, okay.
Or no, 786 times more.
All right.
Not 8 million times more.
Gotti grossed $2?
Yeah, I got 7 of them back.
Yeah, at the theater they were offering refunds for Gotti, I've been told.
Oh, jeez.
Damn. Andrew,
Yeah.
did you ever watch Gotti?
Andrew watched like part of it.
Yeah, I watched like a little bit of it, and then I was like, all right, this is too ridiculous.
Probably a good call. Like, honestly, probably what we should have all done.
Like, this is a garbage movie.
It took me like twice to watch it, I think.
You can
But,
just admit that you watched it twice.
No, I watched like part of it, fell asleep, and then put on the second half. Well, no, and I actually don't know if I ever went back and watched the part that I fell asleep for. I'm not going to lie. Now that I'm thinking about it more. All right, well, so during the late 1970s, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg made a deal with Paramount Pictures to make 5 Indiana Jones films.
Jesus.
The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is notable for being the last film in the series to be distributed by Paramount because Walt Disney Studios will release the upcoming 5th film since its parent company's acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012. And so the last piece of half-assed internet research is that there's an untitled 5th film planned for release on July 9th, 2021.
So that's interesting to me, and
And that's active as of last summer. So it sounds like that's like really happening.
Didn't they didn't Harrison Ford make that a part of his deal for what's it called? Didn't he make it a part of his deal for Star Wars? He was like, I'll do Star Wars, but I want to do Indiana Jones as well.
I could see that. I'm not positive though.
That sounds like him. Because I know he definitely enjoyed the role of Indy way more than he did Han Solo.
Yeah.
Did he? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he hated being Han Solo. It's like one of his least favorite roles he's ever done.
Yeah,
his most grossing films.
He's been very vocal about his love for Indy.
Oh.
And
that was
pretty
his
sure,
chance to shine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
True.
he said, I'll come back for Star Wars 7, but I want a guaranteed Indy 5. And considering the role that Han Solo was set to play in Star Wars 7, he kind of had him by the curlies.
Pretty much.
It's pretty sweet of him.
Not really. It's kind of extortionist, but what?
I mean, he can grab me by the curlies. I mean,
Oh,
what?
you mean sweet as in like cool, not sweet as in like, oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. Well, since we don't only watch bad movies and TV, let's talk about some of the stuff that we have genuinely enjoyed watching lately. Tim, how about you?
So I actually binge watched End of the Fucking World on Netflix this past week.
All right.
It wasn't that great. I'll be honest with you,
Okay.
but it's like the only thing I've watched this week. So
That's fair. I had some inklings to watch that a couple times, and ultimately I just kind of never went for it because I was like, I don't know if this looks like it's actually good. So now that you've confirmed that you didn't like it very much, I'll probably never watch it.
you're better off.
Andrew, how about yourself?
I've been watching a lot of that show Chopped, but
Nice.
also restarted watching Haunting of Hill House just because I had never really seen the very beginning of that show good times there.
Absolutely.
And trying to look for a good sort of scary movie. I have a couple of really good suggestions that I'm curious about watching, so I'll probably mention those next week.
Last week we talked about Velvet Buzzsaw a little bit. Did you end up watching that?
I haven't watched it all. I watched a little bit of the beginning of it, but there's a couple others that I heard the names of, and one of them in particular, someone was saying that it's very like Lovecraftian, which I'm very curious about.
Okay.
So it's called Await Further Instructions.
Okay.
There's also another one called The Void that apparently is very good. So I don't know. Might have to check those out.
All right. Patrick, how about yourself?
So I watch a lot of YouTube, and one of my favorite YouTubers is called The Completionist. And what he does is he plays video games and he completes them. So he goes through and does literally everything there is to do in the game. And I have been just watching his older stuff, kind of seeing how his style has evolved. And it's like, I really enjoy his videos because he's so thorough with the games he plays. It kind of gives me a taste of, and a little bit of a base knowledge of, a bunch of games that I'm not going to play myself. So like when he plays Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, I'm like, I'm not going to fucking play Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories or 358 over 2. And so it's cool. It's a really fun show. If you're into, like, it's pretty campy, but if you're into video games and you like a more in-depth discussion / review of, like, I would say a very in-depth discussion / review of a game, from that perspective, it's a fun channel to watch.
Right on. That's cool. Me personally, I have been watching Crashing on HBO. It's a hilarious TV show with Pete Holmes, who is a stand-up comedian, and he's also incredibly awkward, but he's like a wholesome stand-up comedian who is actually really funny. And basically the premise of the show is that it's like Pete Holmes, he plays himself, and he gets divorced and decides that he's been like he's been trying to become a stand-up, but he was married and just kind of like not really doing anything. And then his wife leaves him because she has an affair, and he basically then decides that he's going to pursue the stand-up comedian thing like hardcore. And so he just moves to Longmont and Longmont. I don't know why I said Longmont.
Colorado, my brain.
My brain is fucking weird. He moves to New York City.
Those are the same.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's weird. Yeah, he moves to New York City and just like starts crashing on people's couches and doing like open mics and stuff and becoming a comedian. And we're now in the third season of it, and it's really funny and just like genuine. It feels very genuine. Like while it's funny, there are also dramatic parts that are not as funny, and like any HBO show is going to have, but it's just very genuine. I would say that's a great descriptor for it. Absolutely. I would definitely recommend it.
Nice. I love Pete Holmes.
Yeah.
He's fucking hilarious. If you haven't seen the Batman movie, just check that out on YouTube. He did a bunch of Batman sketches when the Christopher Nolan Batman movies were really popular, and his Batman voice is hilarious, and his take on Batman is just so funny, and like he's just. Have you guys seen this?
I stabbed you first.
Dick. I stabbed you. Or like, Clark, use your X-ray vision to look behind my cape. I'm flipping like a bird.
Yeah, it's fucking hilarious. Definitely. Pete Holmes is the shit. All right. Well, that wraps up this week's discussion of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Don't forget to check out our incredible website, coldnorthpro.com, where you can see everything we do all in one place. Oh, I guess he's not going to say that it's such a great website.
It
is a great website.
website.
Listen to us weekly on our other gaming podcast, Hard Reset. And next time we'll be watching Matthew Kasovitz's 2003 horror flick, Gothica. See you next time, and don't forget, no refunds.